Hello and welcome to, I nearly said Rewind Reviews, Analysing Avatar, the podcast where we review episodes of Avatar and now Korra one by one. I am Dan, joined as always by the brilliant Chris. Do I do the say hi Chris joke? Say hi Chris?
No, I can if you want. Hi, Chris.
There you go. Just feels like we should.
Brilliant, sweet. That was nice of you.
I mean, I every now and then I throw you a bone. Every now and then, just a little something to keep you keen.
I appreciate that. Yeah, keep me here.
Yeah, because why else are we doing this? There is literally no other gain.
I think it'd be too awkward to quit. Do you know what I mean? I think if I was like, right, I want to stop doing the podcast, it's just awkward.
Yeah.
Just weird, innit?
Yeah,
We're
just trapped in this forever now.
The only thing I can't be asked to do less than these podcasts is having a conversation about not doing the podcast.
I hope that's not one of those it's funny because it's true moments.
It's that level of commitment. I do think that's not true, but we don't. This is probably a nothing but static discussion. People just skipping for the Korra discussion. I do think there is an element of, if I said to you, "I'm not doing the podcast. I don't want to do the podcast anymore," you'd be like, "Oh, come on. Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? What about this? What about that?" Like, if you really fight for, go through maybe even a little bit of anger and really fighting for it. And I do think if you told me you didn't want to do the podcast anymore, I'd go, yeah, all right. Yeah. Okay.
That's funny, but I'm not even sure that's necessarily true. If you didn't want to do the podcast anymore, I feel like I'm just okay. Because I just feel like this always because this is the thing that always baffles me, right? And I don't want anyone to take that as lack of commitment to the podcast, because what I think that is just a reasonable adult going, well, I can't make someone. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I've picked a weird moment to tell you, Dan, but no, I'm joking. I am joking.
Chris is like, I've got the opportunity, get out now. But it's like a relationship.
Nah.
I feel like if once one person doesn't want to be in the relationship, then you can't convince them otherwise. They don't want to be there. You're just gonna have to accept that. You can't. You don't want to be that guy. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been 11 years. I can't imagine not doing it, Dan.
No, neither can I. And I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of fun doing it. So these podcasts aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah. So let's do the thing we're supposed to do. Do the thing we're supposed to do, just talk about Korra. And this week we watched the episode The Metal Clan, which is episode 5 of Book 3 Change. It's the 31st episode of this series. I do a recap normally, don't I? This is the episode in which Korra and the gang arrive at Zaofu, which is the metal city, somewhere in Earth Kingdom territory, where it turns out Lin Beifong has a sister, Suyin, who has started a metal bending society outside of the sort of earth bending society, where they're very much focused on architecture and culture, and it's a very different vibe to the main Earth Kingdom cities. But what we're focused on is that Opal, daughter of Suyin, and Suyin, obviously leader of this sort of town, whatever you want to call it, has discovered she can airbend. So Korra is there initially to take her away, but Suyin sort of says, "Well, you can train her here, please. I don't want my daughter to leave to go be an air nomad," which is very common. And in an attempt to keep Suyin and Lin together, because it turns out they've got some beef, Korra agrees to train Opal, but really her plan is to actually try and mend bridges. She does do training with Opal, and she commits to that, and that goes reasonably well. B-plots include, but are not limited to, Bolin and Opal having a little thing, and Zahir being a creepy weirdo, and showing up at Air Temple Island in Republic City to try and get close to the Avatar, which is creepy and leads to one of the coolest fight scenes of the episode, when he eventually is outed as Zahir, and then he goes off to try and find Korra because he has her information. B plots also include Varek's back, because who doesn't love Varek? There you go. That's the summary of the episode.
And
how did you feel?
And Bolin's getting a little love story as well.
Yeah, I talked about that.
Oh, did you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I said B plots are limited, but not including but not limited to Bolin and Opal having that little fling. That's the first one I said.
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. You did say
that. So with that in mind, Chris, how are we feeling? How's the episode gone down with Chris?
I enjoyed it. I think the design of Metal City. My headline thoughts. I thought the design and especially when we know the show's got a limited budget at this point, I thought the design and the animation of the Metal City was very good and very engaging. I thought the fight scene with the bad guy as he was trying to escape and with Tenzin's sister was phenomenal. Yep. I thought that was great. I thought it was one of the best fight scenes we've seen. Probably the best fight scene this season.
I'd have to have a think, but that's probably true.
Yeah, and I think I really liked Bolin and Opal as a pairing. I thought that was very sweet. Yep. And more than anything, my main headline thought is I feel there's a lot of setup in this episode. I feel like you're meant to go, ooh, what is this guy's plan? And you're meant to go, ooh, why are these two sisters not friends anymore? And colour me intrigued about all of it. I thought it did its job well, Dan. I came out the episode intrigued about all the right things, enjoying, having enjoyed the fight scenes and the visuals, and yeah, I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a good episode. I like that I really love the drama between Lin and Suyin. I think they're a really interesting dynamic. They've obviously turned out very differently, and this notion that Toph turned out to be quite a tough parent to please, which tracks, I think, and I think that's really compelling as a narrative arc because, you've got the two daughters we reveal in this episode, both led very different lives. Lin Beifong followed in her mother's footsteps, and she wasn't happy about that. She wanted her to do her own path. But then we had Suyin, who went the other way very much. She went sort of crazy, and went out and she went Toph crazy. She traveled the world and got into her scrapes and had her adventures. And I do think it's a little bit hypocritical if Suyin's interpretation that Toph was happy with neither of them is accurate. That is a little bit hypocritical of Toph, considering what Toph did as a child. But hey-ho, we don't know the full story, and it's always I always go back to that Simpsons joke about you liked Rashomon. That's not how I remember it. So there's always that element of unreliable narrator. Some people perceiving other people's feelings differently and committing them to sort of fact rather than pondering the possibility they might not be. That makes sense. It's possible that was Su-Lin's interpretation. Su-Yin's interpretation. Su-Lin is what happens if those two characters fuse in a Dragon Ball style. So Su-Yin has obviously got a lot of gripes with Toph as well, but he's certainly ended up a lot more well-adjusted out of it. Whereas I think Lin Beifong has clearly, followed in her mum's footsteps, was not appreciated for that because Toph presumably wanted her to forge her own path. And this is where we ended up, And the enmity between the sisters is something that the series will continue to explore the reasons for as we go forward. But I do think it's really interesting as a setup for a sort of character beef, so to speak. It's a really interesting setup, and then it ends with one of the most heartbreaking scenes this show has ever done. Which I don't want to talk about that now. Should we talk about the scene where Korra brings in Opal to openly manipulate Lin, and it backfires in a horrible way because poor Opal caught between all of this just gets absolutely Opal gets bodied basically. Yeah. It is the closest thing to a yeeting. It's the closest thing to a yeeting without a physical yeeting I've ever seen.
They do a really good job of because when you phrase it like that, when I heard you phrase it like that, then I did, moments ago, I did think, oh yeah, Korra was a bit of a bit manipulative and a bit of a dick in that moment.
Yes.
But you don't. I don't think you feel that in the episode. So they actually do quite a good job of kind of even, like, you know, they do a very good job of setting up, look, there's some shit here. So you sort of forgive, I'm blanking on the daughter we know. What's her name?
Lin Beifong.
Lin. You sort of, you know there's some shit, that Lin's got some shit in the locker. You know that Korra was just trying to help, and Opal's just completely the innocent victim. So it's this really tragic scene, but they do a really good job of not making you feel like any one character is an arsehole for it. Do you know what I mean? Which is actually really good writing.
Yeah, I'd say so. Because I mean, on the surface of it, like, Korra's being very, very like pushy here, and I know she's trying. Her intentions are right. I think the reason you get away with it is because you know Korra's intentions are ultimately good. She just wants to see the two sisters get on. But at the same time, her use of Opal as a pawn in this is brutal and not right. And you know, you sort of go, like, a wiser person wouldn't use Opal like a pawn in this game like that. But that's okay. It's okay that Korra doesn't know that that's wrong in this moment. It's okay because she's young and because she's still learning, and we've shown her doing so much growth, but she's not quite there on some of this personal stuff yet. That's fine. And also, again, because you know her heart's in the right place, and maybe you feel like Korra will walk away from this situation having realized her mistake, maybe, is maybe one of the reasons it doesn't hit you that hard. In terms of, like, that irritation at Korra for doing it, but she does really throw Opal into it. It's my favorite moment in the episode, I think. So for those who don't recall the details, Korra basically comes into Lin and is like, I brought someone who wants to talk to you, and then Opal sort of comes in, and Opal's like, I heard so much about you, and I think you're, from my mom and grandma, you're so this amazing person, and I was kind of sad you didn't want to get to know me, which, very sweet thing for Opal to say, but also a really proper heartstring tugging sort of move. But, she says, I know my family can be crazy or something like that, but I would love it if you would like to be a part of it. And Lynn's just like, get out. And she's like, I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? And Lynn's like, get out. And then she's like Opal tears up and runs away, and Korra's just like, hey, don't get mad at Opal, I asked her here, which is, again, another show. Actually, this is how they get away with it, because Korra shows growth here by saying, don't get mad at Opal, I asked her to talk to you. And then she's like, why don't you focus on fixing the world and stop trying to fix my family? And then we end with Korra being like, Sue's right, you're always going to be a bitter, lonely woman, which is a brutal line. The whole thing is brutal, top to bottom, from all these characters. And I really respect them for not softening Lin, because honestly, with that logic from Opal of, you seem like this amazing person and it made me sad you didn't want to get to know me, with that logic and that statement, would you not have accepted a temporary sort of reduction in Lin's animosity and gone, that's growth, I guess, because Opal said a nice thing, right? Like, that would have been an absolutely easy win for the episode, and we would have gone, they justified Lin's change in personality a little bit towards the end, or her softening towards her family with that Opal moment, right? Lin has a heart, blah, blah, blah. But instead, she responds to this really sweet thing by saying, get out. And Opal runs away. Like, to commit to that's the hard thing. And again, we've talked about this so many times, but I just keep coming back to it because it still remains genius. It's the Rian Johnson thing about Rey. The easiest thing for Rey to have heard in The Last Jedi would have been, you are someone. You are this person. You're a Palpatine, you're Obi-Wan, whatever. Because she wanted an identity. The hardest thing for her to hear in that moment was that she was no one. And we're in the same position here, I feel, with Opal and Lin. The easiest thing to do would have been Lin to soften somewhat. But the harder thing to do, and the thing that's going to be better for dramatic tension going forward, is committing to Lin's position in this episode. And I got so much out of that relationship this episode. Both Lin's and Suyin's, but also the way Opal and Korra slot into that, and it all culminates in that final scene. It's brilliant writing. It's such good writing. I don't know where this writing was last year, but it's here now, and I'm glad about it.
Yeah, I think memory's certain, though, even at the beginning last year, it was a bit ropey, wasn't it? Trying to defend last year a little. I think it was a lot worse at the end, but it was a bit, they're juggling beautifully here. In a way they weren't last year. Like, you know, you gave that joke at the beginning of side plots include, but all of those side plots got their dues. Like, all of those side plots got explored. Like, I think the writing's better this year. Like, it just is. I completely agree. I think Lynn, you hold a lot of, you know, you couldn't do this story in Series 1, but we've seen enough of Lynn for me to know she's still a good person. Whether it's in the form of a cameo or a bigger appearance, I think now we're absolutely getting Toph in this show.
Well, that's one of my big questions for you. So I wrote this down. Toph left to wander in search of enlightenment. No one has seen her since. Chekhov's Toph.
You know what? You know what made me think? You know what made me think at one point we were getting Toph this episode? It wasn't that line of dialogue. It was the line of dialogue where they reminded the audience who Toph was. I was like, oh, we're getting Toph. Like, the whole Toph was the first metal bender. And I'm like, we know who Toph is, my friend. Like, you know what I mean? You're only doing that when you're getting some Toph. So I'd like to see Toph, like, I'd like to see it more than a cameo. I'd like to see some full-blown Toph to sort of help dive into this story of what happened and dive into these two sisters a bit more. I don't know whether it will be that, but we're getting Toph at some point for sure.
Yeah, so so it is Chekhov's Toph then? You think like the mention of Toph, and particularly the sort of ambiguous nature of her fate, even to these characters. The
ambiguous nature of her fate. The reminding this audience that might not know, because we might have a new audience, who Toph is. Like, see it all the time with like returning characters, don't you? That thing of like, I had a friend once who did this, and then you know what I mean. The friend turns up at the end. You gotta kind of play the card for the people that might not know who the character is, and I think we'll get some Toph, baby, and I imagine that little watching it for the first time, Dan was very excited.
Yeah. I mean, any reference to Toph or the Beifong family is and Lynn was one of my favorite characters in this show. Unsurprisingly, as Toph was my favorite character from the original series. For those who've jumped in on our Korra episodes and not listened to our original reviews of The Last Airbender, Toph was my favorite character by quite some way. It's more. It's not a. It's who's your favorite character and why is it Toph is the question, and I think getting to explore even little glimpses of what Toph's life might have been like after that show ended is exciting. The idea that maybe she never quite settled down. Obviously, it's worth noting these sisters are half sisters, so Toph never really sort of had a sort of quote unquote like life mate. Like she never settled down with one person. She presumably continued to travel is my assumption, and therefore met lots of different people and ended up having two kids that she clearly loved. Because there's one moment someone says like there's a quote. There's like a really sweet quote about like the best thing in their life being their family, and then someone's like, well, that's what Mum used to say, and then someone's like, she didn't mean it. I can't remember the exact quote, but there's some line like that kind of hints that Toph really loved her family, and it makes sense that Toph would have had maybe a less conventional family, because she was a less conventional character. And I also really like the idea they hint at this episode, which is that Toph didn't bring her kids up the way she was brought up. She gave them all the freedom. They certainly didn't feel free of judgment, but they felt free to make their own mistakes and do their own things, which is obviously a very direct reference to how Toph was brought up, which was in a much more traditional, sort of family with like, the two parents and the kid, single child, right? She didn't have any siblings, did she? No, she didn't. So the idea that she continued to forge her own less traditional path as she grew up really makes me happy to think about, you know. So yeah, I really enjoyed the little hints of Toph that we get throughout this episode, and I'm definitely excited. And you know, some people call this me giving it away, but I think, you know, if you're following the story, you know this is where this is going. The Lin Su-yin plot line continues on, and we get more backstory and we get more information as we go as well. But
I'm excited, and I'm really excited to see that unfold.
Yeah, it's the heart of this episode, I would say. There's a lot going on in this episode, but that is the center of it, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I hope we have talked. We talked, was it last week, about a lot of threads that sort of, though, have started but then been put down, such as the spirits.
Yeah.
And, you know, Tenzin's just, you know, taking those airbenders we spent ages trying to find. Oh, no, well, I suppose we did see them again this week, didn't we? Because obviously they were... Was that the group attacked? Or has Tenzin gone somewhere else?
So Tenzin's gone to the Northern Air Temple, and he sends word to the airbender from the very first episode, the one that was like in Republic City that was scared that they sort of recruited. It turns out, because they sort of left Milo back with the other kids, with Iki and Kaya, back at Air Temple Island, and said, "You wait here in case anyone else turns up." We've come back this week, and there are like 2 or 3 more recruits that have shown up in the meantime. But they get word that they're all gathering at the Northern Air Temple, so they're about to make their move to join Tenzin in, you know, the next episode or 2, presumably. But when that information comes, it turns out Zahir, who's sort of our bad guy from the series, is kind of like was there to try and ascertain the location of Korra because he thinks she's with Tenzin. And when he finds out she's not and gets a hint of where she actually is, Zhao Fu, he then, you know, heads out. Presumably after Korra. But I think the plan for the recruits that are at the Air Temple in Republic City is to go head to the Northern Air Temple to meet up with Tenzin and the people he rescued from the Earth Queen. Bring all the groups together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad we're getting everything coming together. I'm usually the lover of love, Dan. So I'm gonna ask you before you can ask me. What did you think of Bolin and Opal?
I really like this relationship. I think this is one of the stronger elements of this series. I think Bolin, like they sum it up really nicely in this episode. Bolin has a streak of arrogance to him, and I like this combination because it feels like Opal humbles him somewhat. You know, he starts off by being like, "Oh, it's a shame she's not my type." And then he's like, well, actually, maybe that's not a nice thing to say. Maybe like there isn't such a thing as my type. Maybe I got to give people a chance. And then he does that thing where he like sort of is like, hey, what you doing? You doing some airbending? You know, he's all being sleazy. And then he like reverts to nice, charming Bolin again. And it's like, Opal sort of is challenging him to not continue to be that.
Yeah. Yeah, she puts him in his place, which I think is important and shows good chemistry. And I like, you know, her sort of... They managed to do this really, like, clever thing of, again, it's really good writing, that they managed to have her be like, no, you be yourself, you know, and maybe that'll be fine. Yet also have this sort of nervous, romantic energy.
Yeah.
Which is I really love. I love that nervous, romantic energy. Like, I think, and it's... We know allegedly the reasons behind this because there was actual chemistry between the two people in real life. But that scene where in The Amazing Spider-Man where Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker asks out Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy is just full of nervous teenage romantic energy, which is just lovely. Like the chemistry between them in that scene is brilliant. And this scene somehow manages to have elements of that, but also has her put him in his place. It's very, very well written.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's such a... It's just a lot of care taken in how each of the characters behaves in all of their interactions. Like it feels like every little word is really well chosen to sort of like take us on this little journey. And it's like it's a sweet little story this episode sort of has of them going from like just getting on to sort of Bolin realizing there might be something romantic there and like pursuing it and getting it wrong and learning. Like it's done over just a couple of scenes, but it's so believable and it's so entertaining. And it really does sort of endear you to Bolin. To see him having that little arrogant streak cut down by someone who can sort of challenge him, like and him taking it well, essentially, and learning from it seemingly, is really nice. Because it's funny. I didn't really, until this episode, you don't really think of Bolin's arrogant side, but it's definitely there. I mean, anytime anyone has said anything this season about like what he's up to, he's like, oh yeah, I'm a pro bender, a mover star. Like he lists his accomplishments immediately, like every time. He even does it in this episode. Where almost like braggingly to Opal before, like, even before he's interested in Opal, he's talking about the wonders of his life, and that is again, it shows a streak that I didn't even really pick up that exists in him, but actually, it makes a lot of sense. And it's nice to see him in like relationship.
It came out in full force, like when he was, literally being a movie star. Like he literally, he was really believing his own hype then.
Right, and it's easy to forget that. Like I think, because Bolin's so lovable and goofy, you forget that he has that streak in him. Sometimes they kind of hide it. Like it's okay. I don't think they deliberately hide it. I think it's really open, but like I think it gets disguised under his sort of charming, goofy ways. I feel like. I think so. But it's a great it's a great little romance, and I'd like to see how that develops again. Not resolved within this episode in a conclusive like we will not be together or we will be together sort of way. So you get the sense that's going to continue, and it's certainly better than any love triangle bullshit we've had in previous seasons. That's for sure. If this is replacing the love triangle bullshit, then sign me up.
Oh yeah, they're going to slip back to that. I've no doubt, but I completely agree with you for the moment.
How did you feel about the return of my boy, one of my other favourite characters, basically one of my favourite characters from Korra, Varric? How did you feel about Varric?
Yeah, it was very entertaining. It was very Barrack, because you just like it's a bit. If you wanted to critique it, you could say, okay, yeah, he knows her. They're good pals. That's why he's here. But this season has hopped about so much that just because he knows her doesn't mean he's necessarily staying around too much. So I don't think that's a critique. Look, he's not used too much, particularly in this episode. You could easily at the moment take him out, but I thought his to and throw with Asami was good. Slight bias there. I just like it when Asami's given lines. But I thought it was fun. I thought it was. Yep, exactly. #justice for Asami. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was nice to see him. You know what? I'll be honest with you, Dan. Most of the time he was on screen, I was going, "Oh, Dan's gonna be happy. Dan's gonna be pleased."
Yeah, I mean, they've not missed a beat in his writing either. It's like, Varric, what are you doing here? He's like, great question, Asami. I mean, what are any of us doing here? Food for thought. That's really funny. Like he just continues to be one of my favorites, just in terms of like the entertainment value. And even in this episode when he's like allegedly plotted to abduct the president, never convicted. It's every line is just great. And then they reveal what he's up to. He's seen the future. He thinks the future is magnets. He's working on high-speed rail, which will revolutionize transportation and shipping as we know it. And then he gets interrupted when he says, "But that's not all I'm," and then he gets interrupted by Lin, sort of, doing the Lin Suyin storyline. So they're clearly not done with Varric, because we set up he's up to something. He's back at his old, scheming ways, trying to get ahead, trying to achieve things, trying to make money, trying to be an innovator, a disruptor, or whatever you want to call him. He's up to something, and he mentions high-speed rail and magnets, and the idea of revolutionizing transport and shipping as we know it. That is what train lines did in developing, in our developing sort of society, Chris, back in the day. So I'm kind of excited to see, in that vague, shady past where I never quite remember at what point in history certain things were invented. I always remember being very surprised how early, the modern fridge was invented. Or late? Early. I'm always surprised by how early the modern fridge was invented, in terms of, they had it at a time that I would not have assumed they had it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I've been, I genuinely have been listening intently, and even I'm not sure how we've ended up on you debating when the fridge was invented.
I just mean, it's a parallel to our real world with the trains and how it revolutionized our world, but I don't remember at what point in history that actually occurred. That's my point.
So are you saying you think he's doing some train shit? He's taking the metal trains we see here, and he's going to try and, take them worldwide?
Yeah, well, he talks about high-speed trains. These trains were good, but they have trains in the Earth Kingdom too, don't they? But they're not high-speed trains.
I don't know. I find it hard to. They've done so much modern stuff that I find it hard to distinguish. Do you know what I mean? In my head, it's just it's just the modern times. They might as well. Yeah. Honestly, if someone pulled out a mobile phone, I'm not sure I'd notice. You'd be like, "What do you think of the use of the phone?" I'd be like, "What?" He had an iPhone. That episode where the budget seemed to suddenly increase.
I think I think sort of cross-country, cross or intercity, interlocation, or inter even nation trains have not yet been demonstrated.
Right, fair enough.
That's their sort of in their version of the Industrial Revolution. We're not quite there yet, and what I like about this is, we know Varric is right from our own history. I guess that's what I'm getting at with my silly joke about not knowing the time frames of things. The idea of a high-speed rail that can get you across the country, or will link cities together and revolutionize. He mentions shipping. He mentions shipping as well. He's not wrong. Because that's what's great about it, is we know that that's a real thing. Do you know what I mean? We know that's a thing that happened and shifted the very fabric of our world. In many ways, it changed so much stuff. The same thing will be true here. I think even though it's just a little tease, I have confidence. And I had confidence even when originally writing it that the writers were doing something with that, whether it be a big part of what's going on or just a background thing, the Sotomobiles being developed or not being developed, but being a part of the first season or whatever. It's definitely something that they're going to continue to work on, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting plot, and anything with Barrick is amusing for sure. I enjoyed his presence. I had a blast here. Let's talk about the fight. You really got what's the bad guy's name? Remind me, Tarek?
No, Zahir.
Sorry. Zahir, I thought they really, even though they've already done this, they really emphasised, what is his fucking deal? Why does he know so much? Why is he so embedded with airbending? And, just the threat of him as an airbender, despite the fact that he, wasn't an airbender before, is played really well, and that I thought it was such an inventive use of both airbending and waterbending, like that fight and that sense of like we saw Katara like imprison people with water before, and just in this fight you felt that that's what she was trying to do, but he was just able to get away, and she like literally slipping from her kind of grasp / her ice. I thought it was such a powerful fight. I thought it was really they built the tension well. That uncertainty of like what is happening here was played really nicely, and then the resulting fight. It was a bit like, I will say, although I get I know he's on a spy mission sort of thing, but even when the fight kicked off, there's a slight element of, God, we spent a lot of time getting the band back together, guys. now one of them's gone solo already. Like, it wouldn't have surprised me if during that fight maybe the others had appeared, but maybe they're saving that ace card. I don't know. But I thought that fight was amazing. What did you?
Who else? There's no one else there. It's just Kaya, right? Like Tenzin and the other guys.
That's what I'm saying.
Off
like
the Northern Water Temple.
No, but he's what I'm saying is the bad dude. We've spent the last
the rest of his gang. Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Understood. Yes,
do you know what I mean? We spent a lot of time getting the band back together, and now he's on a solo mission.
Right. Sorry, yes. I for some my brain I don't know what happened to my brain there. Basically, when you said like no one else coming in, I'm thinking what, from the good side? Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, sorry. I
know why that is. Like he's spying to get information. He'll take it back to the rest of them. Like, I get it, but it's just amusing that we spent so much time bringing everyone together.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it there. It's like it wouldn't, he'd be less likely to be able to actually like manipulate his way into the situation if he was with someone else, for sure.
Yeah, of course.
If it's harder to explain a gang of 4, especially because they don't exactly look like the nicest bunch. And he's obviously had a bit of a change to his appearance. He's shaved his head. Because he had long hair last episode. He's I liked how they built that plot all together, because obviously we know it's him pretty much immediately, and I really liked the way they made him seem menacing without making it like, why don't the other characters know? Does that make sense? Like he was just on the line of like, I believe that they believe he's fine, but I'm menaced. I think if you step too far in the menacing line, you start to disbelieve that the other characters wouldn't suss him out. Like you'd be like,
I think that's fair.
You should definitely know by now, right? So I really enjoyed that element of it, because I thought that was really good. Excuse me, because I just thought they when he's talking to Iki, and he's like giving her ancient airbender wisdom or whatever from that guru Lahan, or whatever he's called, this guru he keeps referencing. Like, I don't know, there's just something so sort of eerie about his presence. And he's very different to any villain we've had in this show so far. That's for sure. They've all been quite cackly, mustache twirly, obvious villains, I think, to a degree, and that's fine. Sometimes these shows can have a villain like that. There's nothing wrong with that, but I really like we're doing something different with Zahir. And every time I think, well, you can't make him any more menacing than you already have, they do something like this week. And you're right, structurally, you almost think maybe they should have done this plot before the 3 episodes of him getting his mates out. But I guess the point of this is really for him to find out exactly where Korra is, so he can now go directly for her.
Yeah, plan wise, this makes complete sense.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. How did you feel about like the ominous, like the person saying the absolute worst thing they could possibly say in a moment like this, which is Suyin, saying. Saying, this is the safest city in the world. Moments before disaster, you presume.
It's exactly what you're saying. You're just like, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because there's like this amazing thing of like, they do show that the city, like it's this beautiful metal city that's like opens up like a flower almost to the city to get the sunlight, and then at night they encase it in metal, like the things that have like leaned out like almost like petals sort of come in and form a shell, and you know why she says it's the safest place, 100%. Especially when you see that, it's crazy. It looks like a very secure. And if you can do it pretty quickly, if you know someone's coming, that doesn't have to just be a thing that you do at night. That's a security system as well, right? It's very impressive, but it is like I don't know. You've really set this up as like, this is going to be the best Christmas ever, says a character in EastEnders. It's just, oh no, like you just know, moments before disaster we are. How did you feel about the little hints at the political side, which is we have this week? We have we reveal Su Yin not a fan of the Earth Queen and asks that question of, do we even need an Earth Queen in sort of a modern society? I thought that was a very interesting moment.
Yeah, I liked it because I liked the looping. I think the Earth Queen was probably on the list of, are we going back to this? And I really like the Earth Queen plot. I agree, we don't need her. She's proven herself to be a bit of a cock. So yeah, knowing that there's someone who wants to rally against the Earth Queen. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how they're resolving all of this in like a 13 episode series. But I'm down for it because I'm again, and this backfired on us last year a little bit. But I'm interested in all of these plots, and if anything, I was just pleased the Earth Queen got a name check because I'm like, oh cool, we've not completely we're not dropping. That's kind of confirmation that we're not dropping the Earth Queen, which I'm pleased about because I like that plot.
Unless you mean dropping her down a mountain, am I right?
Yeah.
Because we hate that character. I just thought it was really interesting because obviously the unsaid thing in this episode is that what Su Yin has done is form a city inside essentially Earth Kingdom territory, but they are an autonomous state. They do not... They are in the Earth Kingdom, but they do not, bow to the Queen, so to speak. They are not her subjects. That inherently feels very charged when we've just done 2 episodes of, hey, maybe specifically the Earth Queen not doing the best by her people. And I mean, it's hard to... I don't want to... Politics is complicated in this show because obviously there are always real-world parallels, and that always makes it kind of tricky to talk about. Like, I was very nervous talking about the Hong Kong stuff a couple episodes ago because while that I do really feel that that's a very direct thing when it comes to those Fire Nation colonies from the original series, I'm only able to go from my own experience of having spoken to people who consider themselves Hong Kongers before they think of themselves as being, Chinese or British. They really think that they see themselves as their own, and that might not be the feeling of everyone in Hong Kong. So it's really, I have to be very careful about how I phrase it. The people I have spoken to, in my experience, feel that way, and I think this show is sometimes reflecting that. And protests that we've seen in Hong Kong also imply that there are at least a good portion of that population that feel that way, right? So I don't feel completely out of my depth when I'm talking about that stuff, but there's an element of I don't want to assume the will of a people, right? But the show seems to very much be coming down on the side of like Queen bad, and I not even specifically this Queen bad, but structurally monarchs not good, right? That because you look at what's going on. It's hard not to ignore that you go to the city that's being run by a monarchy and like the poor people are in the dirt, crowded into houses, eating rotten fruit while she's in her like castle with all this space and all this money and wealth that she's hoarding. And then we go to Zaofu that's like an independent autonomous state and it's like a utopia. And they really lean it home. They've got like trains and architecture and safety and culture. And the people seem happy and they've got the best food. And you just like...
And everyone's allowed to do their own thing and there's division and equality.
God,
yeah, no, you're right.
It's like... It's hard not to watch the show and go, I think I know how these writers feel about the Queen. in general as a concept. I mean, you could absolutely read it as they've written a character that they're railing against. They're saying this queen is not handling her job well. She's not looking after her citizens. You could absolutely read it that way. But I do think there's a reading of, hey, monarchy bad, right? Which is fine. I mean, personally, my personal politics line up with that. I don't think monarchies are a great thing myself. But it's a real flag. I feel like they've planted in that, and I don't know. It's hard to ignore. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't talk as vaguely about that because with the Hong Kong stuff, I'm like, I think there are people who might feel that way, and therefore this is reflecting that perspective. This show is like outright going like Queen bad. It's no debate.
It certainly feels like it. Yeah. Yeah, because definitely, like you say, the biggest comparison being the visual differences between the two cities.
Yeah, stuck in the past, subjects eating rotten fruit in crowded houses versus it's crazy. It's just absolutely mad, the contrast between Zaofu and setting up that Zaofu's leader doesn't agree that the queen should even be there, and then with the proximity, you just like, even with them not directly referencing the Earth Queen, I would have been thinking about this, but like having her actually outright state her enmity for the Earth Queen really does excite, because I think it implies they're willing to pull the trigger on something a bit wider. And one of the things that was so great about the original Avatar was watching the politics of the world shift, right? We had an invading force, and watching how that affected the rest of the world politically, culturally was interesting. It was interesting. I'm really getting back into, and because I don't think you ever really get a version of Last Airbender or Korra without at least a tinge of politics. Like a little side dish of politics. I think that's just because it's always been about shaping the world, right? And it's always been about the Avatar's place in a shifting world as well. Roku.
No, but it's done. There you go.
No, I was just gonna say Roku like had the whole thing about trying to keep the Fire Lord in check. That was about him getting his friend, but also a world leader to not attack other nations. The Avatar is naturally always going to be a political figure, whether they want to be or not, and that's just something that's inextricably linked to the way this show functions, the way this character functions in their world. So it's always going to be a part of it for sure. So yeah, sorry, what were you going to say? I talked for a long time there.
Just that it just shows it just shows how bad the prequels did this stuff, doesn't it? I don't mean to shit on the prequels, but I do believe all of the ideas in the prequel trilogy, meaning the prequels, the Star Wars prequel trilogy, all of those ideas I do think are good ones. Like even just Palpatine, the notion of actually seeing him build an empire that people didn't realise was an evil empire, and how he politically embedded himself and then took over. Like, even that as an idea is a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
But it just shows you, like, how actually having people standing around and talking about it so explicitly is a bad execution of that. Whereas this is like, the show hasn't, the show has in its visuals turned around and said Queen bad, but we haven't. Oh no, I suppose this week we did literally have a character essentially turn around and say Queen bad. But still, do you know what I mean? It just shows you how you can do this shit in an interesting way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, I think there is always a danger with these sorts of, like, whether you're talking science fiction or fantasy, or once you're talking genre television, genre movies like that, dealing with a wider world and sort of also hinting where the world is at politically while telling an individual story about a character, like whether it be someone like Obi-Wan or Anakin, or in this show like our Avatar, like you're always, if you're looking to do a personal story that also has implications to the wider world, it's really tricky to balance the politics in a way that feels both realistic but also like feels like you're getting enough of it to get a good sense of what the world, because you gotta sell me on a believable political situation, and then you've got to show me it shifting from the perspective of that one character, and showing the whole world shifting around one person is tricky without making them feel like why is this person the most important person in the world? And the way they've gotten around that here in Avatar is by making the lead character a hugely central figure, right? Whereas in those Star Wars prequels, we had to making excuses for why lowly slave boy Anakin was anywhere near the center of the galaxy while all this was shifting around him. If George Lucas had to keep contriving reasons to put him in the center of it, to some degree, and that feels forced and doesn't quite work as well. Whereas we naturally in the world of Avatar have a character that's like literally born to be at the center of it, so it makes it feel a lot more natural. Obviously, the execution works too. I think there was a way to make those Star Wars prequels work in a way that didn't feel like that, but I don't think the writing was particularly good. George is an amazing filmmaker, but I think most people were willing to agree that George Lucas is not exactly the greatest writer on the planet. So yeah, it's really interesting, to see those differences. But yeah, well, I'm excited to see how that plays out. It was certainly very exciting to see Zaofu this episode, because I feel like even prior to Sulin's dialogue, there was very much an open implication about the two places.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think. So
yeah, I'd say so. What other notes you got? Great question.
That is a great question. I've been slightly distracted because of one of the two. So there are two dogs I'm looking after at the moment for listeners, and dog one is podcast dog. It's the quiet, sleepy dog that can just sit at my feet while I'm podcasting. That dog is quietly sitting at my feet, sleeping in a way that genuinely looks like a taxidermy dog fell over, just sprayed out in a way that it just looks like if I pick them up and righted them, they just stand up straight. Which is a very funny way for a dog to lie. I will take a picture and put that up at some point somewhere. Other dog, bigger dog, excitable younger dog, is outside the door of this room just whimpering. And I don't know if the mic is picking that up, but I hope it is, because it's quite funny.
I can't hear it, which usually as a rule of thumb means it's not picking it up that bad, but still.
Speaking of dogs, Chris, look at this. Watch this professional thing that I'm ruining by pointing it out. I really loved at the start of this episode we had Korra just playing ball with Naga. Moments like that are why this season sort of sings a bit. Like, it's just, we had the time. We've not overstuffed the episode. We had the time to just show Korra interacting with her beloved polar bear dog. And we got a bit of character stuff while it was happening, because Lin was still grumpy and popped the ball. Brilliant. I'm just on board with that.
I did really enjoy that.
Just on board with that.
And just seeing her, it really human. They've done a really great job of kind of humanizing Korra this year, I think, in general.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's just a lovely little moment. I was a bit surprised that Korra's plan was to just keep finding airbenders, because I maybe I misinterpreted last week. I thought the idea was Lin was taking Korra to safety, but she was like, not until I've got these airbenders out. But no, she's still off on her journey. Tenzin's... The separation last week wasn't you go with Lin to be safe and me take the airbenders to go train. It was you continue to travel the world looking for them while I take the ones we have back to the Northern Air Temple to train them. I thought that was really interesting. I guess I misinterpreted the ending of the previous episode some way.
No, I interpreted it the same way. So
yeah. Interesting. I liked the character of Ai Wei. For those who don't remember, he's Su Yin's husband, and he's wait, am I mixing up the characters? Ai Wei is the truth knower. He's not her husband. Her husband's the architect. Ai Wei is one second. I've mixed up some characters in my notes. Yeah, so Ai Wei is the advisor guy. He was the one that brings Korra in to meet Suyin. He's not married to Suyin. Suyin's married to the architect guy. But yeah, I thought Ai Wei was a really interesting character, using his airbending to know when people are lying. That was fun. And I liked straight away, Suyin was like, yeah, no lies around here, because he'll know. Which I thought was good. I'd really liked, small detail, stark contrast. All the other metal benders in this episode that live in Zaofu wear dark shades of green. But Opal, who is the airbending child, light green. And I just thought that was a really interesting choice to put her in a slightly more traditionally Earth Kingdom green compared to the other metal bending members of the family. I don't know if there's any meaning behind that beyond that, but it's a detail I noticed.
It made me the colours in general of the Metal City just screamed Toph to me.
Yes.
And I mean, I assume actually it's probably screaming, earthbending. But to me, it's, somewhat, it was Toph. It made me feel very warm inside.
Yes, agreed. I wrote down one of my favourite quotes of the episode, which is one of those very rare times. Chris, you ready for one of the rarest things that ever happens on this podcast?
Hit me.
Milo made me laugh.
Yeah. I enjoyed Milo this week. Even Milo's maturing, man.
Yeah. Milo, for those who don't remember, was training those couple of recruits that are still in Republic City, and he's getting them to go through the thing Korra did in the first season where the doors are sort of spinning, and he's like being like a military leader. He's being like, did we do the episode where he trained? Have we done the episode where he trained the lemurs yet? Did we do that episode?
I think so, yeah.
Let me just
check.
check.
I think so.
Because I feel like this, if they already did that one, let me just make sure I'm not mixing up my episodes. Sorry.
Say that again, sorry.
1 second. No, they've not done that yet. Okay, fine. Ignore me. There's something coming up. But yeah, Milo is sort of getting his training on in a sort of militaristic way. Like, you maggots get through the thing. And then when Zahir does it, he says, now that man's a leaf, which I just really enjoyed. Because he just kept saying, be the leaf. The other airbenders are like, what does that mean? And he doesn't have the skills to actually explain it. He just keeps saying, be the leaf, which is really good. We didn't talk about this too much. Very quickly on my last note. I love that Kaya sussed out Zahir reasonably quickly.
Yes, I enjoyed that as well. Because, like you say, I mean, he changed his appearance, and we know it's. But it was one of those. He looked pretty villainous even from his entrance. So I'm glad. Right. I'm glad that she kind of represented the audience of. Oh no, this is pretty. This is pretty clear.
Yeah, agreed. Good stuff. So yeah, I just think you run the risk of the Lois Lane problem if you keep her in the dark too long, because eventually she's just looking stupid. Like, you wanted me to believe that Lois Lane is an expert reporter, but she doesn't put together that Clark Kent is Superman. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just hurts her as a character if she doesn't figure it out reasonably quickly. She doesn't need to immediately glance at him and suss it out. I don't need that. I'm okay for her to take a minute or two to put together the clues. That's fine. But if the longer she doesn't suss it, the stupider she looks. And I think Kaya's been set up as a very capable and wise character. She's very much inherited a lot of Katara's traits, and I feel like Katara would have sussed Zahir out reasonably quickly. So I kind of feel like Kaya needs to too. And I'm not saying the two characters are interchangeable. I'm just saying she's demonstrated similar skill sets. So yeah, I liked that. It was the right balance.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment for sure.
So, are you ready to do the thing, Chris?
Let's triv it up!
I'm going to give you some trivia. So, the airship docked in Zaofu is the same model that the Equalists used, differing only in coloration. Is a strange way to say differing only. It's a different color. Now, my assertion here is that somehow during that whole thing, Zahir snuck away some of these Equalist airships and sold them That's my assumption. I feel like Varric's place.
I'd say that's fair.
I feel like Varric's place. I might have said it here. Sorry, my brain's dying. I think Varric at some point snuck away these Equalist ships and has used them to get his position of safety here in Zafu. That's what I'm thinking. So yeah,
I think that sounds very Varric, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So Suyin is a collector of things. She's got a bunch of keepsakes. There are a bunch of little references to the original Avatar series in that. It shows she's got the dragon pipe that's pretty much identical to the one Sokka used in Avatar Day. She has a statuette of the Painted Lady, and she has one of the masks used by the Sandbenders. Although that, presumably, is not so much directly a reference to Avatar, but a reference to her own backstory. She talks about travelling with the Sandbenders for a while when she was younger, when she was travelling the world. So that's probably just a reference to that. She's got a couple of photos on her desk. One depicts her son, Juan, as an infant. There is a picture of a character who will become more important later on the newspaper that Lin is reading right before Opal and Korra come in at the end of the episode. For those of you who know who I'm referring to, you know who I'm referring to. I just was going to skip that trivia, and I was like, but I'll get comments. That, did you not notice the detail? No, it's the detail. Chris doesn't know yet. Chris doesn't know that character yet. It's not information. It's relevant to him.
Mate, there's a character we've known for 3 years whose name I can't remember. You know what I mean? So Lin, that's her name. So I wouldn't worry too much.
That's fair. That is absolutely fair. I said we'll be bringing this up for the next 3 episodes, and here's number 3. This episode was, of course, one of the 4 that were leaked by the Mexican Nickelodeon website Mundo Nick on June 8th. Which, to be honest with you, at this point, Chris, I'm mostly keeping that trivia in to say Mundo Nick every week, which is fun.
Yeah. I enjoy hearing you say it, for sure. Yeah,
thank you. This episode was storyboarded by Natasha Wick. The choreography for Suyin's dance rehearsals was originally going to be used. Originally going to use reference provided by Brian Kinitsko's wife, but sadly an injury prevented her from doing so before the storyboards were due to be sent to the animation studio. So I guess someone else did it in the end instead. That's a shame, but I think that sequence turned out really good. It must be said. It looked amazing. And actually, we didn't talk about it, but the visuals of Korra and Opal training as well looked amazing too.
I thought we've seen a lot of training montages in this franchise, and I thought so to make that engaging and look cool and even if it's just you going, oh, that looks cool, that's still a win when you think about just how many training montages we've had.
Yeah, it's like framed really interestingly. They're like the way they turn around each other, like as they go. I don't know. Yeah, it just worked really well. I loved it. I thought it was really, really good. Speaking of, actually, there you go. The courtyard in which Korra and Opal train in airbending was designed by Angela Sung and was coloured by Emily Tetri and Brian Kinitsko, and is a tribute to the American painter Maxfield Parrish. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure who Maxfield Parrish is, Chris. I'm not cultured enough. So let's find out very quickly. I'm going to put that name into Google and look at... Ooh, this is some nice paintings. Yeah, okay. Very colourful. You can see straight away, actually, like the influence on that scene. Yeah. Lots of very sort of colourful sunsets. Oh, these are really interesting. Yeah, well, there you go. They took influence. I can see a specific painting, actually, called Daybreak, which I think might have been a specific influence on that sequence in Korra. The way the columns are there and the way the 2 characters are framed and then the light coming in from the background. Lovely. Oh, also this one.
Nice.
This one. I don't know. Yeah, there's a few. I recommend people Google this artist, Maxfield Parrish, who I don't know much about, but seems to have painted some really beautiful paintings. 1870 to 1966. He died at 95. Wow. Well done.
Wow. Fair play.
Yeah, I'm definitely not
that's
making
a
it.
Life.
Yeah, with my diet, Chris, there's no way I'm making it to 95. So that's impressive.
I remember you once said to me you were having a midlife crisis, and I went, aren't you like 30? And you were like, yeah, mate, I ain't making it much beyond 60. I just thought it was dark, but it was really funny.
Yeah, it might have been even earlier than that. I might have been like 25, and I was like, I ain't making it past 50. You see my diet? Yeah. I'd forgotten I said that. That's funny. Isn't it weird to like forget a joke you made and then come back to it, like from the perspective of someone repeating it to you and go, "Oh yeah, that is kind of amusing."
I think about that joke often. I really do. Genuinely, it crosses my mind often. It makes me laugh.
Right. And it feels like I set that up, like I'd pre-thought of that. There's no way that I made the comment that I was.
Oh, you had, yeah. You could tell.
Yeah. That's a how long were you thinking of that one sort of moment.
Yeah, because I think even if memory serves, you said it a few. Like I had to bite. Like, do you know what I mean? You said it like the first time you said it. I just kind of like, like, do you know what I mean? I didn't even, and then you said it again, and eventually I had to go. Aren't you like 30? And that's when you drop it.
Yeah, you go. Yeah, okay, that's funny. That's even funnier knowing that I was that sad about it. I've got this joke, but I need the setup and the punchline to work. It's moments like that that make you realise how unlikely the scene from Good Will Hunting really is, you know? Like how lucky he got that he gave him the feed line, do you like apples? And the guy replied, yeah. Because I just would have been like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's just not. Yeah.
He's put a lot into that landing with the right question, right?
I think someone did a sketch about that, though, didn't they? Like, what if it wasn't
maybe
apples? What if it was another?
Sure, do you like apples? Actually, I more prefer a pear. Well, how do you like these pears? Like, it just it doesn't work.
I think there's a piece of stand-up about it. Is it maybe? Someone does that. I'm sure of it.
I'm wondering if it's a podcast bit. Speculation. I'm wondering if it's Dan Harmon bitching about that movie. Because Dan Harmon famously, really, that movie gets up his craw. Like, he did a whole parody of it in Community, but I'm sure on Harmontown he talked about that movie a bit too. Maybe he had a big sort of, like, monologue about that scene and why that scene doesn't work for that reason. That could be it. If that's what's in the back of my brain.
No, I think I've got bad news, Dan.
What?
I think it's a Louis C.K. bit.
Is it really? That's not.
Yeah, it is. And I
think it's acceptable that to point we enjoyed Louis C.K.'s work. It's a shame that he turned out to be a piece of shit.
No, that's what's worse about it. From the images, I think I must have seen it on some form of social media because from the images, it looks like a recent Louis C.K. bit, like which has upset me. But yeah, there you go. It looks like that's what it is.
Well, there you go.
I might be wrong. I can't see it with. I'd need to listen to it with audio, which obviously my laptop's muted. But yeah. It looks like it might be Louis C.K. people. So maybe don't hunt out that bit. That's
I am also sorry. I'm doing just a bit. I'm so sure. At the very least, I think Harmon has commented on this. I feel.
Oh, wait, so I've now Googled... So I've Googled Good Will Hunting stand-up, and there is a Reddit thread entitled Louis C.K. does Dan Harmon's Good Will Hunting bit, but years later. Oh, so maybe it is the Dan Harmon bit I'm remembering then.
Fucking... How'd you like them apples, Chris? I feel really proud. I feel like
I'd have to look into it more, but it looks like this Reddit thread has both the Louis C.K. bit, which it looks like has been a clip that has been released as a it's a clip from his special Sorry. So it is a recent special, but it looks like it was a promo bit, which is why it's easy to stumble across it on social media because I've not watched that show. I think I even hunted. Yeah. Anyway,
I think
I had the opportunity.
If memory serves, he did. I don't know if this is the special we're referring to, but there was a special he did that was like his return special where he was going to address it, and I remember thinking, well, let's see what he has to say for himself.
Yeah, I think we checked that out.
Maybe he will be open to growing, learning, admitting fault, reparations, all that stuff.
That's the thing. I think neither. So if it is in that, because I think both of. I think I remember discussing it with you. I think both of us attempted to watch it and went, "Oh no, fuck this."
So I think what happened, I was just getting. So I think I acquired that special and put it on, and immediately it became clear he wasn't going to be apologizing. And in fact, he was like leaning into it, like it was just his thing. And I was really frustrated and like grossed out by it, and his lack of ability to acknowledge wrongdoing really frustrated me. So I do remember starting that special and not finishing it. So maybe it's in the opening of that special, or it's somewhere built in, and that's where it comes from. But I swear, my brain is just the Dan Harmon criticizing it bit. It was so clear to me. Like as I was talking about it, I was like, I'm sure it was Dan Harmon. But that's why I was surprised when you said Louis C.K. But that's funny.
Well, it looks like both have done a version of it according to this Reddit thread.
Yeah, but although I will say it's worth clarifying here, that doesn't necessarily mean he stole it. Like it's sometimes simultaneous thinking, right? Two people can have the same idea, the same comedic premise, and then often you'll end up with similar jokes because that's the way that works. Anyway.
Which is a point one of the Reddit users makes as well.
Yeah. Anyway, parallel thinking is a real thing, and if you're both coming up with jokes with the exact same premise in mind, they're going to be similar. They just are, and that's just the way it works. But anyway, right. There was a scene cut from this episode where we see Minghua shave Zahir's head with an ice razor. But it was cut from the final storyboard. Do you think we needed to see that, or do you like that he just sort of shows up with a shaved head and you just go, well, he's had his head shaved?
I like that he shows up, partly because it's, but it took me a moment. I'm like, is that the guy? I think that's the guy. Pretty sure that's the guy. So I enjoyed that.
Right. Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, that's good. Oh, you're right. For a first-time viewer, like, because he looks like that, spoiler alert, for the rest of the season, his hair doesn't grow back in a day. Like that's quite that is as iconic an image of him. That's kind of like his most sort of like recognizable look, and to the point where when the season started and he had long hair, I was like, oh yeah, that's what he looks like at the beginning. But you're right. Like to me, he's very iconically and obviously Zahir. But I guess to a first-time viewer, there must be a moment of pause where you go, is that him? He looks different, and I guess you're only going to get that if you don't show the hair being cut.
Yeah, there absolutely was that.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a distorted theme that plays when Lin experiences emotional distress in this episode, and it uses something called a metallophone. I really like the idea that such an instrument exists. If I'm being honest with you, Chris, I've had a look at it. It looks like a xylophone. Being truthful with you, mate, I don't know the difference. A xylophone made of metal, I guess. Metallophone. But I've googled metallophone and a bunch of pictures have come up, and a lot of them do say metallophone, but there's some under here that say glockenspiel. So I don't know, alto metallophone, aluminum glockenspiel, xylophone. I don't know. These are all similar instruments to me. I don't know the difference, but yeah, they use a metal-based instrument to do her sort of the piece of music that underlies her distress this week. Very good. That's all of the triv. Would you like to do a quick feedback from last series?
I'd love to.
Let's do it. You got to do the little intro music though.
Oh yeah. Here we go. What do we know? We know what the listeners said in the past, but it's our future now. Well, actually, if we're being technical, it's our present.
Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to whatever Chris just said. That thing where we look at the comments that we got on last season from you lovely listeners. So this one comes from a friend of the podcast, The Ponderer, who you can check out on YouTube at The Ponderer, does really good videos, and has covered Korra as well, pretty extensively. And I haven't had a chance. I was watching, they did a big video breaking down Korra season by season, and I only watched up to the season 1 portion originally because we hadn't done our reviews on season 2 yet. And then when I finished season 2, I was like, I can watch the season 2 section, and I never got around to it. But if I wait a few more weeks now, I'll be able to do the season 3 one as well. So I might just do that now. But I'm very excited. Ponderer, sayer of smart things, always interesting thoughts. And they were someone I cited as being someone who is not a fan of the episode last year, with Wan, the first Avatar. And I said if there's anything specifically we didn't cover because we tried to talk about the two sides of that coin, the people who were less fond of that episode, and we covered a bunch of points. One of the things we didn't cover, that Ponderer mentions here. So this is from the Ponderer. Personally, I dislike the portrayal of spirits as more domestic, for lack of a better word, making them not mythical creatures, just another species with their own society, is an idea I would have vetoed hard had I had any say in the show. It's just lame, I think, to demystify something so much when the mystification was the point initially. That is a really interesting point. We didn't really cover it in our discussion of that, but of course, Wan meets spirits and they have a little society and they're talking to him and they're interacting with him and they've got like they all go to the watering hole once a day and get water and stuff, and it's like, actually, is making them sort of like just their own sort of society. Does that take away some of the mystery? Because the spirits in the original Avatar were such a mysterious force that we didn't understand, and sometimes they seem like animals, and sometimes they seem malevolent. Like the two I always think of the one from the first season that turned out to be a cuddly sort of panda bear type thing that was just a protector of wildlife. But then later in the series we meet Ko, the spirit that steals faces. And they were very malleable. They could be anything, the spirits, including the big owl whose name I always will sometimes casually remember without thought, and then sometimes I'll just never be able to remember it at all. The big owl that looks after that library is a spirit. They seem to be very varied. Whereas I will say that the Wan episodes of Korra definitely made them seem a bit more like just sort of like from beginnings they seem like a society of creatures, mostly quite normal, I guess, to a degree. They just sort of exist in a physical world like ours, where they're running around just trying to get food and get clean and just live, and that does take some mystery away from them for sure. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think we did bring it up because we were distracted by the fact that they managed to make the origin story work, which I think, and I know the comment isn't necessarily disregarding that, it's just also factoring in this. But I think, I still maintain the origin stuff works really well. Again, I know they're not saying it doesn't, but I think that's why we got so excited about how on earth did they make that work, that I think actually we did miss this really valid point. I think unfortunately it's a victim of the more a world is explored and told, the less mystique there is. Do you know what I mean? We're talking metachlorines, we're talking the timeless child, we're talking wizards shitting on the floor and magicking them away with their wands. Do you know what I mean? All these big franchises, in order, take your shots for Star Wars, Doctor Who and Harry Potter there. But the mystique slowly goes from all of these things as you have spin-offs, as you have things explored. And I think that it absolutely is right. It's absolutely a fair point. I think they, like I say, I didn't notice it because I was so bowled over by the origin stuff being done well. But I think it's very valid. And I think those things are always going to... things like lore and, it's. I think often you'll find that, if one thing didn't bother someone in one franchise, then it probably doesn't bother them in another. Do you know what I mean? There are some people that aren't that bothered about lore and mythology and stuff like that being broken, and then there are some people that really hold it dear and are bothered by it. And I think it sounds like that might be the case here, and that's absolutely fair enough. And I think if mythology is something that you really like in your shows, it makes sense that something like this could break that slightly. I get that. I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I'm sort of a little bit torn on it, because I'm sort of in that weird position of, I do agree that it would have been better to keep the spirits, a bit more unknown, but I don't think it precludes different kinds of spirits. You know, that particular group of spirits exists in that way, or did at that time. But the spirit world, like the real world, like has evolved somewhat since they were separated. And now we do have spirits like, you know, Ko, the face stealer, and like some of the more interesting stuff. We know less about how the spirit world functions in a modern context than we do from back then, you know. When we visited the spirit world last season, you know, there was still quite a lot of mystique to how it all works, I think. And while I do agree that it was probably not great to, like, I don't know, make them seem like a society of beings that were all sort of interacting with each other and aware of each other and clubbed together because they were concerned about... They acted as one. I think that's the real issue. It's seeing them act as one, where they were all sort of agreed that humans were bad and were sort of, like, fighting that fight, you know. But I just think enough time has passed that I just don't think that's the case now anymore. I think enough time... I think thousands and thousands of years have passed, and clearly, you know... I'm just not sure that it demystifies their origins somewhat, but it did that for the Avatar too. So it's no more of a problem than showing us how the Avatar came to be, I suppose, for me. But I do agree that is an issue, and that certain things are best left as mysteries, and the spirits are definitely one of the things I would have put in that bracket. But I think, because it doesn't really cover where the spirits are now, I think that's why it doesn't quite tip over the edge as to being a big problem for me specifically. Because I can kind of sort of say, well, there's still a certain amount of mystery in modern day spirits. Like, I don't know what the modern day spirits are up to or like, you know. They veered off societally from humanity at that point. What happened to them after that is its own interesting point. Does that make sense? Like, and then there's still some mystery within that. But I don't think the ponder is incorrect. I think that is because, as you said, a really valid point. So I could definitely see somebody not liking that, and would empathise with that person, because if you feel that way, that is a bummer, and there's going to be it's going to be hard to get around that when you have these big things in law that change how you see a thing or demystify a thing. Then that's no fun. That's never great, especially if it's something you appreciated for its mystique initially. So yeah. Good question, good comment. I know we did a couple of like silly ones the last few weeks, or like not silly, but like we did like some of the food ones. I do love one of our listeners, Punkfish, has continued just to randomly send us food ones. For example, commented,
big fan of that,
yesterday. Tonight I made 2 simple burritos for myself. Don't have a lot of stuff at home right now. So they were only corn, tofu, tomato, onion and sriracha. But I grilled them nice and crispy and really enjoyed them. Good work.
Big fan of that. Big fan.
Yeah, I love a burrito.
Nice. Yeah, but I don't eat burritos enough, mate, if I'm honest.
Yeah, you know what the problem is though? I'm bad. I like a shit burrito. Like I'll quite happily eat a burrito from like a bad chain restaurant. Do you know what I mean? Like I've had burritos from Chipotle. Like I will devour them. You know what I mean? Like someone probably take me to a nice fancy Mexican restaurant that's like really like authentic and the food's like really good. And like I'll be just like, I don't know, burrito's a burrito. Like I think I feel like I'm very uncultured with burritos. Like I just eat it. Like to me, to my brain, there's almost no difference, which is terrible because there absolutely is a difference. I know I know objectively there's a difference, but I'm uncultured when it comes to burrito eating, and I'll just eat whatever. Like I'll just eat to me any burrito is a delicious burrito. I have no scale.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think also those restaurants have so much choice. Do you know what I mean? It's hard for me not to choose a quesadilla or an enchilada, or you know what I mean. So
yeah. So Nadia always goes that way. Nadia always goes that way when we go to Mexican restaurants. I do like a classic burrito, especially if it's got a bit of spice to it. Yeah, give it.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway, that's been everything for this week. I don't know how to segue out of that conversation. I'm just going to end, is what I'm going to do. Oh, no, thank you everyone for listening. All the usual stuff. Oh, yeah, patreon.com/NothingButStatic. If you want to support us financially, it gives you access to episodes of this 1 week early and access to our special bonus podcast, Nothing But Lyrics, where we dissect the lyrics of songs, sometimes to figure out their meaning, sometimes to make fun of them. You can also support us by heading over to any of our social presence places and clicking, liking, tagging, reviewing, thumbs upping, starring. So yeah, you can head over to any podcast platform of your choice and interact with the podcast in any shape or any way, shape or form. Even doing as Punkfish did, just leaving a little comment telling us what you had for breakfast or lunch or tea, whatever. At this point, I don't care. Just tell us what you ate. Tell us something interesting you ate, and we'll you know, maybe I can't promise we'll talk about all of them, but putting the comment down there does help the algorithm because it's interactions with the podcast. So you know, like, comment, all that
and history. History, including this podcast, would indicate we'll probably talk about most of them.
Well, they're interesting. They are interesting. But yeah, at a certain point.
No, I mean I'm saying I love talking about what people at. Yeah, I think it always leads to interesting stuff. I'm down for it.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to leave a comment like that way. Interacting with the podcast always helps. Of course, you can always tell a friend, or you can just keep listening. That supports us too. If you're not enjoying the podcast, of course, we'll say what we always say: stop. Just stop listening. That's fine. That is very much allowed. But thank you all very much. We'll see you in a week for more of this, whatever this nonsense is. So that's been everything this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review Old Wounds.